All right. Our student presenter, student host right now is Bianca Alcina. Bianca Alcina, and let me tell you who she is. Bianca Alcina is a junior psychology major with a minor in bioethics. Oh, someone, excuse me, someone has their system on. Can everyone mute? Put their computers on mute, please, because there's a feedback and it will be in the recording. Thank you so much. Bianca Alcina is a junior psychology major with a minor in bioethics and an eminent scholar at Tuskegee University. I love that. She's a native of Tuskegee, Alabama, and currently resides in Greenville, Alabama. She is the reigning Miss Psychology and Sociology and a member of the Psychology and Sociology Club, Peer Alumni Council, and several other organizations. He's also a bioethics honors program scholar studying under the direction of Dr. Reuben C. Warren and Dr. David Hodge Sr. He's also a direct descendant of, oh, look at this, of Andrew Swint and Vertus Pollard, who were amongst the 400 men that were deceived by the United States Public Health Department's study of syphilis in an untreated Negro male. She's a granddaughter of the late Joyce Pollard Williams, who served as a treasurer for the Voices of Her Father's Legacy Foundation since his conception until her passing. She's a daughter of Deidre Parker Hayden Jackson, an acting chair of the Scholarship Committee for the Voice of Her Father's Legacy Foundation. Her plans after obtaining her Bachelor's of Science degree from Tuskegee University are to pursue master's degree in counseling psychology with the intention of opening her own practice. She hopes to specialize in family and marriage counseling with emphasis on maintaining the Black household and breaking generational curses. Over the summer, Bianca participated in the Tuskegee University UC Berkeley Data Science Initiative. So she had the opportunity to complete the data science courses at UC Berkeley while completing a research project that focused on the correlation between the lack of Black mental health professionals and generational traumas. She will use the knowledge she gained from the studies at Berkeley and through the National Center for Bioethics and Research in Healthcare at Tuskegee University by integrating big data and ethical research practices into her future research. She credits her success to her mother, who set the precedence for how academic excellence manifests itself as an invaluable resource to all facets of life. She would like to thank the faculty and staff at Tuskegee University for investing in her academic and professional career, and would like to thank the Voice of Her Father Legacy Foundation for giving her a platform to preserve the legacy of her great grandfather and her late grandmother. Oh my God. That was beautiful, Bianca. Bianca. We are so blessed. We are so blessed to have Bianca introducing our next presenter, Dr. Vickie Mays. Go ahead, Bianca.
Dr. Vickie Mays is a professor in the Department of Psychology in the College of Letters and Sciences, as well as a professor in the Department of Health Services. Professor Mays is also the director of UCLA Center on Research, Education, Training, and Strategic Communication on Minority Health Disparities. She teaches courses on health status and health behaviors of racial and ethnic minority groups, research ethics in biomedical and behavioral research, social determinants of mental disorders, and psychopathology. She holds a PhD in clinical psychology and a master's of public health and health services, with postdoctoral training in psychiatric epidemiology, survey research as it applies to ethnic minorities at the University of Michigan, and health policy in research and development.
I want to thank you for your introduction, but I want to thank you for who you are. So, like was just said, it's incredible. So, kudos to you, because As a psychologist, I can barely wait for you to be let loose in the world.
Sorry, I need to off. Sorry.
So thank you.
Thank you so much. Amber.
I'm going to start by really talking about how honored and privileged it is to be speaking at this historical recognition. It gives me the opportunity to say thank you to the families of the men who participated in what I consider to be one of the most egregious and unethical studies in America. Like war heroes and our recognition of their sacrifice on behalf of their country, these men, whether they were your father, your uncle, your grandfather, or someone you knew about in the community, what happened is their tragedies helped to expose a breach in the system of research and ethics in healthcare. And part of what we began to see, and you know, my colleague, Dr. Northern Gamble, also said this, is the country's attitudes towards Black bodies and Black lives. And as we know, it is far from satisfactory. What I'm sure about is that the experiences of these men provided me and my family, who happens to be from the South, and others a better level of protection from research abuse. I also have to say thank you because it added to my professional career success because of the pressures that come from these tragedies to let some limited number of us to the table as PIs in research. So it's my honor to be here, and any pride that's taken in what I've been able to achieve as a Black researcher, I want to make sure that all understand the history upon which my successes emanate from. And so I want to acknowledge the ancestral contributions upon which my talk stands today. You know, in many talks, we hear people talking about the ancestral land upon which we stand. Well, I was asked today to talk about, you know, where we need to be going. And one of the things to think about is, you know, maybe it's time that we also make sure that we recognize the ancestral sacrifice upon which Black research is done. And those of you who are calling for Belmont 2 to understand what respect is about, and that would mean, you know, acknowledging the past to do better for the future. So the place upon which I'm going to do my remarks today is really on the state of where we are now. And because we know that there's these very blatant shortcomings in the United States about our commitment to the health of all people, particularly Black people. So I'm not going to do the how many numbers and, you know, spend any of our time that way, because we all live, you know, this life that is compromised by disabilities and discrimination, and spend more of our days in mental dis-ease than in emotional well-being because of the many structural types of personal experiences of hatred and discrimination and stresses and strains. So I'm not going to start there. But what I am hoping that I can do is to leave us with a strong resolve to demand, while we are here for just a little time and the right leadership in place, a call for a Belmont 2. It's because of the horrendous experience of the men we are remembering and recognizing today that we got Belmont 1. And Belmont 1, this is very important, is a set of principles and regulations that guide our research activities. And what you're going to hear from me today is a focus on what principles are, because this is to me where the critical change points are, is in terms of understanding what ethical approaches are in a Black community. So as the families of the historical legacy that gave me and my family greater protection and research and aided my career and that of other Black people in this country, please consider thinking about what a letter with your voice to President Biden, the Surgeon General, Secretary Becerra, and the National Academy of Medicine demanding a consensus process for a Belmont 2. Because what it would help do is establish yet another historical event in my lifetime and mark a continuation of legacies in your lifetime. So the question is, why is Belmont 2 necessary at this time? And again, I want to revisit the notion of it's all about principles. It is principles that allow local IRBs and researchers to consider actions and behaviors that are necessary to local culture. So, let me kind of talk about it. And as you can see here, let me just kind of do this. As you can see here, I'm starting out. We got a project name, just like the project 1619. This is the 90-50-25 project, creating Belmont 2 and revising the National Research Act. You need a public law. So it's not enough to just have somebody make some promises, but you need a law. And when you have a law, you also have the ability to have greater accountability, compliance, and people like the Office of Civil Rights to act on the behalf of that law. So for me, it's important to, that we do this in a way in which a difference can be made and not just a tolerance while we have certain people in office. So in order to do this work, in order to get to Belmont 2, understand what the process is. And you can see that it took a lot of months and a lot of discussion to get this national act. We need leadership such as that which exists in the people who are sitting right here, the center, your foundation. And that leadership is really to show that we are still dying unnecessarily because of what is not studied and what is not known about our health that could be known, and the ways in which we're not fully informed, consulted, and our data is stolen for profit and career advancement. What you see here, I'm going to be very clear, March 2022. What happened to the men and their families was egregious, but the fact that we are not in drug trials in 2022, that's also a form of egregiousness, because it means we live with medical interventions that compromise the precision of our care and leave us living with lesser states of health on a daily basis. This is why we need Belmont 2. This, again, was also very recent. And what it is that we're in a public health system, often because of how we get our health care. We are often in a public health system in which data is used from everything from talking about evaluations of that system to the need for surveillance and monitoring. It's not just that we don't get and give informed consent, but it actually means that when the data is collected in this way, we have less accountability for its quality. We have less impact on the ability to be able to use it. We have no control often on its interpretation of that data because it's not under any kind of watchful eyes. We saw this in the beginning of the COVID pandemic when more than 50% of data lacked race, ethnicity, and delayed resources and care to our communities. The data may be protected in this instance. People talk about, well, the reason you can't get it is because of privacy and protection, but we don't have accountability. And even researchers like myself have difficulty being able to get just this kind of data. Recently, there was a real push and pull between the American Indian Alaska Native population and CDC over the interpretation of the legal status of the public health aspects within the American Indian community, of their ability. They collect the data in the tribes, send the data up to CDC, and CDC told them they did not have a legal right to that data. So, again, we need to understand that in Belmont 2, it's time to think about data as a part of a larger accountability system in health equity. This will be a little dizzying. I have to thank and acknowledge that, this comes from something I just recently designed, so I'm still working on it, that Dr. Warren and I, if we get this proposal, it would give us the opportunity to do this. So here's the point. We talk about harm, but we often talk about harm only to the individual. In Belmont 2, it's time to talk about social vulnerability, assessing when a person participates in research, what are the vulnerability points for them? And to also look at social harms. So when we think about this, what we need to understand is that something as simple as giving any number of a person's identity variables, such as my race and ethnicity, whether I'm a citizen, whether or not I'm a sexual minority, that what you do with those identity variables in terms of the conclusion that you make, they can come back and impact me as a person who's a part of that group. You will often see, and this is to get more research funding, it's often to get headlines, what you often see in a lead of these, evening news is something like Black Americans or immigrants, or, the lead is the identity, and the outcome is usually the worst it can be. And what's the impact of this? This is why we get pulled over by the police. This is why we get told that we're too expensive to be into care. So we have to really start thinking about what data I give within the context of a research study is a part of a much larger research data enterprise. That research data enterprise has started all the way back from here to understanding the political and economic context of data. We have seen in administrations where they wanted the data on immigrants. We have seen, for example, in COVID-19, where hospitalization data was to miss going to CDC and go directly to the White House. There is a political context to my data elements. Helping me to be fully informed and to give consent says that you need to assess what my vulnerability is, and then tell me about what the social harms are. If we are really going to address health inequities and health disparities, then we need to understand and spend some time in Belmont too, talking about the politicalness of data, the economics of data, the value of data. And so this is just, something I'm still working through to try and help us to see that the one variable that you may collect can have major implications in terms of social harms. This is a project, that is being done by UNICEF. And what UNICEF is teaching us is that data and power go together. He who has the numbers may be likely to change the argument and to make demands, particularly if there's a legal process in place that can support it. So we've got to start understanding value. And when I say we have to understand value, I want us to understand that data is both a benefit, but it's an economic factor. Maybe it's time when research is being proposed to lay out the potential value of the participation of Black Americans in research, how it's important to their benefit, and what is the downsides if that data collection is not met. Currently there are no consequences in the research enterprise to not collecting what you got money for and said you were going to collect. Instead, what happens is we are told that we are hard to reach, couldn't get us. And then we end up with research which is underpowered. We can't say very much. We put everybody together just like we're all the same. But we also have to, create a situation of trustworthiness where we see the value. We need to be able to see value in participating. And that value we want to see is not just for us, but we want to see it in terms of our community. Now, when gay men started participating in HIV research, this is early on, and even though they knew that they would not benefit, they were very clear that their community was going to benefit. And see, this is where I totally agree with Dr. Northington Gamble about this notion about trust and trustworthiness and all that. It's like there is such a lack of being able to give me back a value-added statement about what my participation was and whether or not my participation added to something. Instead, I get and I see these headlines and I said, was that a study I participated in? Because I see the results as being so negative. Because what the person wants is to be able to go on to the the next study and get more money. So don't ask me to trust you. Instead, you need to incentivize me by indicating some benefit, either in my local healthcare system, a new policy you will advocate, or my ability to access the care that you just studied. So I'm just gonna, I have limited time, so I'm just gonna do the respect principle. So when we look at what Belmont 1 was about, and I think, I wanna make sure we understand what we got so that we can be clear about what we need. Because as Black Americans, we do not exist in the United States with the same level of rights and privilege as others. The value of our data, the pharmaceutical companies, because of health disparities, the kind of economic, psychological, and biological vulnerabilities that we face, all play into the need for a very culturally informed, approach about how to transform these ethical principles to serve us. So, kind of indulge me in understanding this principle about how important principles are. So what you see here is, and this comes directly from the Belmont report. So basic ethical principles refer to those general judgments. Didn't say it was regulations, but judgments that serve as the justification for ethical principles and evaluation of human actions. Now, most of us know that in terms of judgments, most of us have to go to school to be able to make those judgments. Just like our student wants to be a psychologist and would go to school and be trained, physicians are trained, lawyers are trained to render a judgment that has been trained. But on an IRB, we do not have trained judgments about things that apply to race and ethnicity. We have people who think they know our experience, but I can tell you with the fact from having sat on these things, they do not know our experience. I'm just going to do this. This is, and I realize I didn't put the name on, but this is a Norwegian ethicist who I loved his, a couple of slides I'm going to show of his, because he shows you who influenced the way we think about ethics, who was asking the questions when Belmont 1 was actually being formulated. Some of the people who were ethicists, this stuff comes from, as you can see, a cast of characters that I don't think they know me. They may know somebody, but I don't think they know me. Here are the ethics. And these ethics, I think, come into play even more in terms of healthcare. So when we talk about ethics of principles and duties, well, look at who we're calling upon as the floor, as the foundation, So John Rawls says, unbiased justice is what we want. Ethical judgments independent of contextual circumstances. Not me. You need to understand my social vulnerability. And we saw how this notion of social vulnerability was very important to us in COVID, because we were trying to predict who was most likely to get infected and impacted. So I don't want unbiased justice. I want social justice. And there's a difference. So in Belmont 2, I want social justice. And I want to be able to explain what that means. I'm just going to run through a couple of these. Like, if we're talking about, again, you hear, and people will talk about Mills and Hare. I mean, these are names that if you, studied ethics, these come up all the time. And if you've ever sat in the, on the medical school side of, patient care ethics, and somebody is coming in with these justifications, here's the names you hear. So it's like, well, what are we looking here? Is it an individualism? Is it a collective view? I know what my people believe in, but I'm not seeing that reflected in how we train people to make judgments about what a harm or a benefit is. I'm going to do just a couple more, and that is because I couldn't leave off the ethics of relations and care. The moral challenge, trust implies responsibility and power. Trustworthiness demands accountability and a recognition of power and who has it and who doesn't, so that we're very clear about how these things work. This question also is asked, should the relational and individual override the interests of organizations and society? Well, if you're going to protect me, then I'm very clear that it has to, because society doesn't have my best interests at heart. So my sense of what the ethics need to be is a little different. And this is his checklist. And I did this so that, you know, some of the things there you could see in terms of his universal principles. Informed and independent consent. Well, again, trust me, it goes back to the determination of some of these ethics forefathers around how they see universal principles. So, you know, these principles, they may still be, as a principle, a notion to consider, but it is in their interpretation and the judgment that we need to reconsider how they apply in our community. So, for example, how do they operate to ensure consent is informed? Review is knowledgeable about harm and benefits, and is it just? Because those are the three principles. Well, typically, and again, this comes directly out of the Belmont report, is, you know, these principles are supposed to facilitate the IR review in a fair, just, and moral manner. Now, I'm still Black in America, and moral manner, in terms of as many things as we have seen from George Floyd on, it doesn't exist in the consciousness of people. They have to sometimes take a lot of time to reach, oh, is that what you need? So in Belmont 2, that's B2, is needed to raise awareness coupled with guidance and regulations on what it looks like for Black America, because we don't experience this country in the same way. Are there cultural values? Now, this has come up many times. People go, well, is there a Black ethic? And is there a Black? Let me tell you, it's like, you know, the question is, do the ethical principles differ? And why is this important? Yes. What is necessary in terms of representation for the IRB? We do not say race and ethnicity is necessary. We say that if you're going to do a prisoner study, it's necessary. So the assumption is that you know all about race and ethnicity. B2 says, this is a principle we need to think about. Are we training IRB members to do the work of the IRB, which means, you know, to go along as needed, or need we also specify with greater precision the basis of necessary knowledge for the protection of human participants, particularly in Black America? So it's like, my question is, we need a Belmont 2 that you can say, how do you know me? Because the way you know me now is bias, prejudice, and a lack of formal knowledge. The ability for you to make sure that my research is reviewed fairly, it's a different story now. It's like, people can find me when they need a grant review. People can find me when they need an article reviewed. Maybe it's time that we use technology to have greater participation by, quote, experts in the IRB. And I'm just going to, you know, leave you also here with Vernelia Randall, who many of us know. When the question is asked of her, is there a Black bioethics? For us, that means a belief system that includes a humanistic orientation, a focus on both personal and social responsibilities, and a high value placed on community belonging. To the extent that bioethical discourse and practice do not incorporate these values, they do not reflect the values of the African American community. So we have much to discuss in terms of a Belmont 2. So in Belmont 1, we are told these are the two things we need. We got to treat the person as an autonomous agent. And of course, if you have diminished autonomy, you're entitled to protection. But how can I be an autonomous agent if I am not truly informed? In order for me to have the capacity to act this way, you have to be deliberate about personal goals and acting under the direction of such deliberation, which is what Belmont 1 says. But it's the lack of being truly informed. And I also say that on the side of the IRB, it is their lack of being informed, because then they cannot protect us in the sense of knowing what it is that might be a harm. So here's what I'm going to advocate. You know, I was asked to give my vision, and I'm going to tell you, we need Belmont too. And this has been talked about, respect for persons and in their linkages to families, communities, and populations. So what we need to be able to do is talking about conditions of vulnerability. And that means understanding how connections and linkages not only create vulnerability, but the ability for harm, discrimination, and loss of societal opportunities. So I asked, what is informed consent within the context of social connections? Well, what that means is you have to understand how genetic data and those in my life are impacted by my giving genetic data. Do you have a responsibility in some kind of way to ensure the protection of those who are connected to me? So what is understood about de-identification? We say, oh, well, I removed these things about de-identification. Nope. I can tell you as one who's been in a lot of surveys, as soon as I tell you, you know, I'm Black, I have a PhD and certain things, I always know in the university when I do a survey and they say, oh, this is anonymous, I laugh. There are only 3 pieces of information. I tell you, I'm Black, I'm female, and what division I'm in. Because for many years, I was the only Black woman. So then you knew what my answers were. The other thing is about data disaggregation. Not all Black populations are equally vulnerable. We do not pay enough attention to the migration patterns to the US have changed so dramatically. So we're all Black. No, some of us are Black Caribbean, some of us are Southern Black, some of us, you know, so it is become, for me, an ethical issue about presenting this data correctly. And one of the places, and I'm just going to say this, that I just, you know, find myself not in agreement with is in all of us. All of us is collecting genetic data, and the genetic data is collected where there is a site, not where the slave ships landed, so that you can understand the genetic mixture and characteristics of that. So again, what you're doing is collecting data in a way in which it is not necessarily going to be as helpful as you want me to believe it does. The other thing is I want a Belmont too to do monitoring, reporting, and defining what compliance is. And once we understand the value of the data, and once we can get a public law, not just principles, but a public law, then we can get the Office of Civil Rights to work on, you know, data violations. But right now, that's very hard to do. These are, again, this is the Norwegian ethicist and myself. We need in Belmont too to develop principles of respect. And I'm just going to do a few of these. So respect for participants' right of proper information about the purpose, the methods, and the financial sources. See, I did have financial sources highlighted. I said, let me not pick on people too much. But we need to understand if my data is so valuable to you, then you need to treat me like that data is valuable. You need to compensate me like that data is valuable. And you then will be successful at, you know, getting the number of subjects of participants that you need. We have to think about the respect for participants' privacy and security of their data, even when it's de-identified. This is all the big data stuff. Again, you know, let me, you know, put it with my Twitter account and this and that, and boom, you have me re-identified. Respect for people's values and attitudes. And again, it's like Dr. Northington Gamble laid this out. I will not participate in my colleagues' work when it's about mistrust. I say, if you call it mistreatment, you'll get me at the table. But mistrust, I'm not buying into it. Because what you're doing is blaming the other person. You know, it's the same thing in terms of the responsibility. People have been mistreated and they have a right to be then somewhat concerned. I too have done research in which it says it's not about the study, but it's about the current kinds of treatments that people get. And, you know, I think we need to, you know, think about what these rights would be of what respect means in Belmont too. in terms of talking about institutions, they need to pay respect to socially vulnerable individuals and groups and use SBI. And think about when you've got a hospital, medical center, etc., your research should not be divorced from your care institution. Or you have the capacity, once this care comes online, to determine whether you're going to use it, whether you're going to make it available. My first HIV study, I went over and negotiated, because we didn't have a lot of Medi-Cal slots, and said, I'm not going to accept this money if all I'm able to do is tell Black people that they are infected and then turn them away. And you say you're some of the best people in the country for dealing with all these diseases. I need a slot. So I negotiated a slot. Hey, this money can go. I said, I can give this money and put this grant someplace else, So we have to learn about also and own this in terms of respect in the institutions from which we're doing some of this work. This is going to be my last one here. And again, this is, this work that I just talked about. If it gets funded, we'll work on. And that is, and again, Dr. Warren said it so well when I talked to him, trust is not first to talk about. Trustworthiness is where we start. I happen to be on a federal advisory committee and other places where part of what I think it's important to do is for us to understand that when trustworthiness is not there, that the value and quality of the data is diminished, and that we have to have a data stewardship and data governance policy that says when data is collected, we do what is best to make sure that it is of quality and value. And then maybe we can talk about trust. But trust to me, it sits off to the side. And there are issues because it's the individual here. And to me, it's like, who is the actor and who is acted upon, I think is central here. So I'm going to stop here, but, in the time that I had, that was about the, I could have talked about all these other principles and things as well, but I wanted to make sure I at least got as much of this in as possible.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Mays. And but we have some very, very important questions in the queue. And Sister Alcina will ask them, but I just want to make one thing. First of all, very, very powerful presentation. Thank you so much. It was absolutely powerful. I like that Belmont 2 is less of a justice program and more for social justice program. So it's moving towards a concretization of things that we can actually touch, taste, feel, hear, and see. But the one thing I would like for you to do for us before the questions are asked, Dr. Warren made a point, not all of us, but all on us. So the first thing I want for you to do for us is to define, just in a couple of words, what Belmont 1 was all about, because a lot of our students here, this is the first time. So share with them what Belmont 1 was about, so that they could have a great appreciation for what Belmont 2 is going to be about. It's significant. Thank you. And then after that, Bianca will ask questions from the queue.
Sure. Belmont 1 was what happened for the research world after the results of the U.S. Public Health Service study on syphilis of Negro men in Tuskegee occurred. What it did was said, wait a minute, it was really, needing to respond to the egregiousness that was seen. It said that there are abuses in research that we must do something about. So Belmont 1 is a set of principles. And then there are some regulations, but it's mainly that we say, these are the things you think about when you are reviewing research. So what Belmont 1 got us was IRBs had greater authority and are designated as any federal research has to be reviewed by the Institutional Review Board. Belmont 1 also said that, these principles, which were beneficent, respect for persons, and justice, were to be the principles upon which to guide our behavior.
Okay, thank you so much. I see the word justice there is present, and what you're advocating is for more social justice, seems like, as what I'm hearing. So thank you so much. All right, Bianca, the questions are on you.
Okay, so someone asked, how do we get in contact with Dr. Mays and work with her?
That's a good one. So Dr. Mays, you could post your stuff later, or I could put it in the chat later. Okay, so what's the next question? There's a large question on there, Bianca, and I will take your post again. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. 25 years after the founding of the National Center for Bioethics at Tuskegee, there has been little improvement in Black and white health disparities in Macon County and Alabama, and in rural and urban communities across the country. The question is, what can and should the National Center do in the years ahead, and with what key partners, so that by its 30th anniversary, it is a maximally powerful driving force for the moral changes needed to achieve true equity in health and healthcare?
Ooh, that's a very tall order, but if anybody can do it, the center can. But let me explain. I want to put some bounds on expectation. The changing of just even our data systems takes a lot of money. So, for example, to truly know why a person dies sooner than they should, we call it, years of potential life loss. It requires several things that are not funded things often. So the center would need to have some health economists. The center would need to have the state be able to make sure that it is recording race and ethnicity. That it would require the data systems to be able to say, is this person living in a rural area? Is this person living in an urban area? There are many things. And 5 years would be lightning speed for this to happen. But seeing a progressive change, I think I would say the center's probably goal would be changing the hearts and minds of legislators and changing the hearts and minds of the people who live in your area to understand when something is not a good study for them, to learn how to demand the research data when they participate be given to them. I'm working towards saying to the federal government, you want everything to be in part, you probably don't know this, PMC, which is the National Library of Medicine, said, well, here's a free article. You can get it free what I publish. But it's like, why should you have to go do that and read it in my jargony way, as opposed to there being some way in which I have a community forum, some way in which I put it on my website, that I have blurbs. It's a different day. We need Twitter. We need to use all the things that, we do when we recruit those subjects. We need to use those same things to give them the information back and for them to challenge us. When you read that I was supposed to get 100 Black people and I got 20, then you should be jumping on me. You should be saying to the county, don't give her any more money. She can't get us. Give it to Dr. Warren and Dr. Hodge. They know how to get the 100 people. You then change the research landscape. I know that's not satisfactory, but I also know trying to change the world in 5 years is hard. But I do know there are things that are changeable that make a difference.
Dr. Mays, one of the things you pointed out, which makes you just stated race and ethnicity. I'm from the United States Virgin Islands, born in the United States Virgin Islands. My brothers and sisters born in the St. Kitts, which is the British West Indies. And so I was a United States citizen from birth, but they were not. So I'm legitimately African American, and they're Caribbean American, even though Caribbean as well. They're not Caribbean American, they're Caribbean Islanders, right? So, but we all share the same pigmentation. We all look alike. So when you talk about that difference, it becomes difficult trying to find how to do research money. Dr. Warren and I were trying to put together we actually put it together, but the first ring of the dementia grant we're working on, it was a huge deal, and a massive part of the issue was who we evaluated, Black people or African American people. It took months to get out of that conversation. So the challenge then of who and who's on the landscape and who you're trying to reach, I think that is so significant. So those lines are blurry still. Okay, so
but see, I don't advocate that we just collect data where it's Black or African American, but say to me, what is my identity? My identity is I'm a Southern Black. Somebody else's identity is that they are a Black, Caribbean. Somebody else is a Black something else. Identity is starting to trump just the notion of the race and ethnicity of a person. So how I eat, who I hang out with, who can influence me is more a function of my racial ethnic identity than it is of classification. And I do think we have to get better at classification, which is, I just doing a survey with our Black students, and there must be like 15 things where I say, where did you come from? Where did your parents come from? And then I ask you, how important is that to you, your identity? Because if I'm going to pull up together in a group to change something, I want to know who are your influencers.
Right.
The final question is a request, actually. Someone said, please speak a little more about the quality of data in Belmont 2.
Okay. The reason quality is so important is that in Belmont 2, if I can get you to have a standard for what is considered quality data, then it almost demands that you can't send me, and CDC can't send some data that has missing fields. You have to fill the fields out. So in COVID, what delayed and led to unnecessary deaths is that 50-something% of the reporting on COVID did not have race and ethnicity. So we couldn't even demand supplies be shipped to certain places. We couldn't demand the communication campaigns be certain ways. We didn't know here what languages to put something in. So if there's a data standard, before that data is registered and used for public policy interventions, it would have to be complete to a certain level. A good example to think about is CDC was giving advice about children's return to school. I published a paper recently that showed you for Black kids, they were lacking so much data on Black kids that if they didn't use an imputation method, which is how do I do an estimate for those people whose race and ethnicity is missing, that they were not giving advice that was based on the profile of Black Americans, but they were giving advice based on kind of an average. And our communities were not, on average. We had denser, schools, we had older schools. So that advice is important. So you want a data standard of what quality data is.
Thank you, Dr. Mays, for that beautiful presentation. I do ask that you stick around for final questioning. Now I will be presenting Ms. Carmen Thorton. Carmen J. Thornton has 24 years of nonprofit federal awards management experience, specializing in grants and cooperative agreements from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Institutes of Health. Over the course of her career, she has led a number of federally and privately funded programs impacting chronic disease risk, HIV/AIDS prevention, teen pregnancy, health equity, and supporting youth with physical and learning challenges. Carmen has worked at a number of school board associations, the Society for Public Health Education, and the United Negro College Fund. Carmen currently works at the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry as Director of Research, Grants, and Workforce and Interim Director of Development. At AACAP, Carmen oversees programs aimed at addressing the physician workforce shortage and in promoting racial and ethnic diversity in the child and adolescent psychiatry field. Carmen heads up a number of special task force and initiatives at AACP, including the Presidential Task Force on Combating Racism and Addressing Health Equity and the Ad Hoc Committee on Editorship and Publications. Ms. Thornton also serves as the Program Administrator for the Career Development Physician Scientist Award funded by the National Institute of Health. Ms. Carmen Thornton is a descendant of a United States Public Health Service syphilis study at Tuskegee subject. In honor of her grandfather, Fred Tyson, she serves as board member and finance committee chair for the Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation. Established in 2014, Voices works to preserve the history of the syphilis study and offers scholarships to descendants. Voices has partnered with a number of organizations, including Black Doctors Against COVID, the AD Council, and the Alabama Department of Health to promote health advocacy and to promote COVID awareness and response. Through this work, Ms. Thornton has appeared on a host of media outlets, including Dr. Oz, Nightline with Brian Pitts, Shondaland.com, and NBC Nightly News. Ms. Thornton has served as a keynote and plenary speaker for a Smithsonian Institution lecture series on public health ethics and served as distinguished faculty for Tuskegee University's Summer Institute Bioethics course. She has given numerous presentations on child and adolescent health. Carmen received her Bachelor's of Science degree in Community Health Education with a minor in biology from Howard University. She earned a Master's of Public Health degree from the George Washington University School of Public Health and Health Sciences. Carmen also holds Master Certified Health Educator certification from the National Center for Health Education Credentialing. Ms. Thornton is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Northern Virginia Alumni Chapter, and served as president of Northern Virginia Delta Education Community and Services Foundation. Ms. Thornton resides in Southern Maryland with her husband, Ed Thornton. She loves spending time with her family and friends, praying and reading inspirational quotes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation or introduction, Bianca. I sincerely appreciate that. And it has been a wonderful afternoon. I've enjoyed every presentation immensely. So nice to always see Dr. Northington Gamble. It's been a couple of years since I've seen her. And of course, hearing from Lily, I get to say Lily on the Zoom chats. It's wonderful. To hearing from my mom with her work and her passion and talking about her father and the other men that were a part of the study it's an honor for me. And Dr. Mays, it's so nice to finally meet you. I've read your work. I've heard your name many, many times over the years. What I didn't include in the bio that I provided was that my grandfather's participation in the study really charted the course for my career. I was very close with my grandfather. He cared for me a great deal. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house and learned a lot from him. And I owe him so much. And his career, my career is a dedication to him. Dr. Northington Campbell mentioned some work that we did really early on where I shared a picture of me and my grandfather's, and I was sitting on his lap. And that was actually during the presidential apology in 1997. There was an article about the apology and that there were some surviving men who traveled to the White House for an apology. And I, excuse me, read about the the story in the news. And so I reached out. I live in Washington, D.C. I've been in D.C. since I graduated from Howard. And I reached out to my mom and I said, Mom, did you know about this apology? And she said, no. And I said, well, did grandma hear anything about the apology? And she said, no. And I said, well, somebody should have invited us, or somebody should have reached out to us so that we could be, a part of the study. So the apology. So I did call the White House, who directed me to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And they told me that we could not participate or were not invited because we didn't have syphilis ourselves. And that's why we were not invited to participate. So that really made me mad. So I told my mom, I don't think that's really fair. There's, I think they're doing the community of family members, a tremendous disservice. And we need to do something about it. We really have a voice and we need to be engaged. The syphilis study had impacts on so many different levels, internationally, from a community perspective, and we need to have a voice. And that was in 1997. And in 2014, Voices for Our Fathers was established as a 501c3 organization. Since that time, I had worked, Dr. Northington Gamble introduced me to a number of different people, and I started doing a number of different speaking engagements over the years. And depending on what was going on in the news, the requests for interviews or the requests for input would ebb and flow. But we have never seen anything like we've seen over these past couple of years with the pandemic. So I am happy to provide to you some information about our vision of the Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation. We are a small but mighty group who's been doing some wonderful things over these past couple of years. And by God's grace and mercy, we hope we will continue and grow. We feel we had a wonderful annual healing day yesterday, and one of the speakers had mentioned, this new narrative. And our work really does speak to creating a new narrative of the syphilis study, where we're moving from trauma to triumph. We have a wonderful board. Our board is made up of family members. We have a small nominal dues for people who are interested in becoming a member. I think it's $25, and you can go to our website, voicesforfathers.org, to get more information about our activities and what we do. We have members and we have a board. My mother, Lily Head, is president. We have Dr. Roosevelt Bonds. Barbara Council is our past secretary. My Aunt Joyce Christian, Mr. Clement Jukes is the acting treasurer. We have members, Evella Gaston, Peggy Tatum, Feline Williams, Amy Pack, Dr. Kimberly Carr, Dr. Betty Crutcher, who is my cousin, and Janie Holmes, and then, of course, myself. And we also have Bishop Deirdre Parker Jackson, who is one of our newer board members. And we come together on quarterly conference calls. We have special committees that sort of work to help us achieve our strategic plan. And our mission is to preserve the legacies and history of the 623 men victimized and unethically treated in the U.S. Public Health Service syphilis study. We foster by fostering social justice, education, and public health. And these past couple of years, again, have been just overwhelming with the response and the amount of work that we've been able to do. I'd like to acknowledge with special thanks the National Center for Bioethics and Research in Healthcare, especially Dr. Reuben Warren. The National Center for Bioethics and Research in Healthcare was established as a result of that Clinton apology back in 1997. There's been a number of directors of the Bioethics Center, including Dr. Gamble, Dr. Secundi, and now Dr. Reuben Warren. We actually started, somewhat as an offshoot, if you will, of the National Center. The National Center started convening families of the men Back in 1997, I believe the first time I participated in an event was maybe in 97 or 98. But we're really very thankful to them for their partnership and for working with us over these years. I also acknowledge the Milbank Memorial Fund, which I will be sharing more information about our partnership in this presentation. And then I also wanted to give thanks to the members of that original syphilis study legacy committee. My mom acknowledged Dr. Northington Gamble, but I also wanted to also express thanks and appreciation, of course, to the full committee member group: Myrtle Adams, Patricia Clay, James Ferguson, John Fletcher, Lee Green, who I had a chance to know and work with for a number of years, and Barbara Harrell, Ralph Katz, who's passed away, and Vickie, Dr. Mays, who has been just Susan Reverby, who has been a wonderful and instrumental and very vocal person as it relates to the syphilis study, but also the syphilis study and infectious STI study in Guatemala. So I sincerely acknowledge them and thank them for all of their work as well. So our Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation, we have a very broad vision. We want to support social justice. We're working to preserve the history of the men that were involved in the study, supporting the families, recognizing and honoring the women as well. We have sort of a 4-point prong effort or priorities, if you will, that sort of speak to our activities. And there's so much work that we're doing. We have a wonderful scholarship program that's been around almost since the inception of our program and being established as a 501c3. These are our 2022 scholarship awardees. They're all currently descendants. They're descendants of men who were subjects in the study. They are all going on or have in different schools, programs across the country. Cameron Williams, Edward Lewis, Mackenzie Foster, and Taylor Newman. We are so proud of our students who are going on to do wonderful things. Some of them are majoring in nursing or education or biology. We have provided $27,000 over the years to scholars. We're really very proud of the work that we've been able to do. We have partnered and received support from a number of donors, and we thank them for their support. We also have established a really nice working relationship with the Henrietta Lacks Foundation, who's given us resources and support to help fund our scholars, our students. And we have a special fund in the name of Joyce Williams, who is a past treasurer for the Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation, who passed away. We have a special fund in her name and honor. And we're establishing a new fund as well, which will be the Crutcher Neal Scholarship Fund. So we are growing by leaps and bounds with our scholarship program. And we do have a need and an interest to expand our program. We want to be able to, of course, continue to support family members who are in need of and desire and have a passion for going to school. Education is so expensive. We want to continue to be able to be a support. We also want to have room, I guess, at a broader table to really impact and support research, diversity-focused research, perhaps helping people establish careers in diversity-focused research and social justice work. And we're really very excited about the potential and the opportunity to expand our scholarship program to perhaps even support medical students or PhD students who are going on and have an interest in the syphilis study or in bioethics and ensuring social justice. So we're really very excited about some of the things that we're doing. We have a wonderful scholarship committee And we, encourage anyone, I'm not sure who all is on and participating and where you are in your professional walks, but we certainly welcome you to support us, to be a part of us, and learn more about some of the wonderful things that we are doing with our scholarship program. One of the other activities, one of our major activities, is our annual Day of Healing. We have had our annual Day of Healing for 10 years. Our last two, we had one virtually in 2021 was our first virtual annual Day of Healing, which was really quite impactful to be virtual. There's definitely, I think, some pluses and minuses to be in the virtual space because you can reach more people in a virtual capacity. But we were really very excited to sort of branch out our annual Day of Healing. There is so much healing that still needs to be done with many of the family members who had fathers or grandfathers or uncles in the study. Many of our family members are still learning, about everything that we know about the syphilis study. There are people who are just finding out that they had a family member that was in the study. And so our annual Day of Healing is one that really is for family members to have them kind of come and learn about, the importance of moving from trauma to triumph. It helps us sort of talk about our familial experiences with the syphilis study. In 2021, we had a wonderful conversation. We featured and honored women during this annual Day of Healing. And this past in 2021, we actually invited other members of historical atrocities that have happened to the African American community in the country. So we had family members of the Henrietta Lacks participate. We also had our very own favorite Deirdre who participated and represented the syphilis study. And then we had a family member from Africatown and also a member of the Black Wall Street, who I believe her great grandmother was a victim and experienced Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there was a terrible massacre there. This annual Day of Healing that we had just yesterday was and we also had our annual business meeting yesterday evening or into the night last night. We had a wonderful healing symposium yesterday, and we featured a number of area clergy leaders and pastors who had a wonderful words of healing and inspiration for the family members who were joined on the call. We're hoping that we will be able to meet face-to-face again in 2023, and we are really excited about having some big plans, inviting some of the speakers that we had this year and the year before back, and doing some wonderful things at our annual Day of Healing in 2023. Another major priority that we're working on is establishing and creating a memorial and inspirational garden at Tuskegee University that would be located near the National Bioethics Center, or sort of in the pavilion or inside the National Center on Bioethics. This is actually sort of, I guess, not a blueprint, but a schematic of a proposal or an idea for the memorial garden, which was presented by Miss Kayla Hurd, who at the time was a student at Tuskegee under the direction of Dr. Kwesi Daniels and Dr. Wesley Henderson. And we are raising money and support for our memorial garden, and we're really very excited about what is to come. Of course, it takes time and it takes money and it takes fundraising to put together, a structure like this. My personal goal was something that I very also feel strongly about, is being able to have some type of a permanent structure here in the Washington, D.C. area, either working with one of the national the Department of Health and Human Services, or even maybe the museum, the African American History Museum. They do have some mention and notice of the syphilis study in the museum. But my personal goal is to have some type of a permanent structure to recognize the men and the study here in DC as well. We're really very excited about these activities, and we have wonderful leadership helping us. So probably one of the biggest things that we've been working on is education and awareness. I think my mom had mentioned, and I had mentioned the number of the outpouring of response and requests for partnership to support and encourage vaccine awareness and COVID awareness over these past 2 years. And we have just been inundated, and we have a lot of pride with the work that we've been doing. This is just a photo from initiative that we worked with the Joy Collective and the Black Doctors for COVID and the Ad Council. We worked on a mini documentary or a short film with the Ad Council that has been viewed all over the world. It airs on different public access channels. It even aired during the University of the University of Alabama and Auburn University halftime football game, which, if you know anything about Alabama football, that is a really big deal. We were featured in really just encouraging people to learn about the vaccine, to gave our rationale and justification as to why we got vaccinated. Each of us have received our vaccination, and why it was important for our community to do the same. This is a panel that we participated in at Howard University, my alma mater, last summer. It was a wonderful presentation, and it sort of led to other things for us. This is a wonderful painting that was commissioned, and the artist Candace Taylor was commissioned to put together this piece that reflected the men in the study and the sun rising up behind them, as you know, it being a new day. The Milbank Memorial Fund is a 501c3 organization that's based in New York. They have a long-standing history of being very instrumental in supporting public health work and research for a number of years. They are committed to using evidence to improve population health. When I was a graduate student and had to do research for any given paper or report, I would find things in the Milbank Memorial Report and use that and follow leads that I found there. Mr. Christopher Collar, who is the president of the Milbank Memorial Fund, reached out to my mother back in 2021 and told her about all of the work that they've been doing to learn about Voices for Our Fathers, which really came to a surprise to us, but also shared their involvement in the syphilis study. They worked with the Centers for Disease Control by providing resources and money for the autopsies of the men to be conducted. We were very surprised. My mother was very surprised to hear from Mr. Collar because, one, she wasn't as familiar with their involvement in the study, but also in their spirit of wanting to make right or wrong, to acknowledge their wrongdoing, and to be involved in supporting us in the work that we are setting out to do. And we spent a number of weeks speaking with them. We met with the board chair, Mr. John Colmers, and had an opportunity to actually meet just recently members of their board. And we had a planned a public apology on June 10th of this past summer for Milbank to come to Tuskegee University and give a formal public apology for their involvement in the study. We had a ceremony there at Tuskegee University where Mr. Collar was present, as was one of the Milbank family members was represented there as well and gave some very kind and warm remarks. My mother Lily gave a wonderful presentation, and we as a group accepted the apology from the Milbank Memorial Fund. Along with the apology, the Milbank Memorial Fund provided Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation a $2 million gift. And we are using those resources to establish and further launch the work that we're doing with our scholarship fund, with our memorial garden, with promoting education and awareness and providing the scholarships. We believe that this story and this relationship with the Milbank is a tremendous example of what it truly means to acknowledge wrongdoing, to truly want to be involved in making a difference. And we actually put together a statement that we put on our website and the Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation website that sort of spoke to how we look forward to moving forward and what it meant to acknowledge this gift. And it reads, the Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization established by descendants of the 623 men used as subjects in the U.S. Public Health Service syphilis study at Tuskegee. Established in 2014, our organization's mission includes preserving the history and honoring the men who were unjustly used as research subjects to examine the effects of untreated syphilis in Black men. Our organization also supports efforts that address healing from trauma brought on by racism in healthcare, and forming health equity-focused public health and clinical research and practice, and promoting education and scholarship for a more diverse public health and medical workforce. Voices accepts the apology and reparations from the Milbank Memorial Fund. We recognize the fund's action as validation, accountability, and restitution, an important step in illuminating past racist acts in healthcare that have in part held African Americans back from achieving health equity and this country from achieving health equity. We also believe the Milbank Memorial Fund's actions serve as a tremendous example of what it means to sincerely acknowledge wrongdoing. Our partnership with the Milbank Memorial Fund provides an exciting opportunity to be further engaged as a partner in health equity and in social justice efforts. Together, we will work to seek bridges throughout communities most impacted by disparities that remain in health systems. And our hope is that this partnership models critical steps for other organizations that they can take in seeking pathways that help individuals and families move from trauma to triumph. It is our sincerest hope that our other foundations and healthcare organizations previously involved in ethically corrupt care based on race come forward in the same spirit as the Milbank Memorial Fund. Doing so will go for in extinguishing the combusting danger of medical mistrust that exists among African Americans and other marginalized communities. And again, the actions of validation, accountability, and restitution that we believe are just so critically important in helping us sort of move forward and address that. Can you all see my screen? I just want to be sure that you can. Okay, very good. To go back to where I was. Where was I? I don't know. Okay.
Oh, we can see it now.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it now. All right.
Okay, great. We are really very excited about continuing our partnership with the Milbank Memorial Fund. We look forward to being engaged with other groups. We have been in touch with a number of one medical specialty association to sort of give a talk there We're looking forward to having joint talks with Mr. Caller from Millbank to sort of talk about what our approach and our activities will be moving forward. It's a new day, and we are creating a new narrative. And we do not want anyone to forget about Tuskegee. And I am most excited about the idea of a Belmont 2, Dr. Mays. I do, it definitely speaks to real system and structure change that can move us forward closer to health equity, right? And with that, I would say that community involvement and participation in the writing or the revision or the review of Belmont 2 really would be critical, in involving the community in that way. It would be, I think, so important and timely. And so with that, I would say that I would be so excited to be engaged in any way, or to be a vessel or used in any way, or any other member of the foundation, I'm sure, would also have an interest in that as well. I always like to talk about suggested reading. This is just sort of a list of books that, I think very highly of, that sort of give wonderful accounts of what happened. Dr. Northington Gamble and I had a brief exchange earlier in the day about the reference of Tuskegee and how often it's used and brought up in conversation by scientists, by researchers, by experts in the field. And again, I don't know who's listening in. I do not know who is watching, but I will say that be mindful and respectful. There are many family members who follow the syphilis study and read about Tuskegee as much as some of the researchers do, and it can be very abrasive when people hear and say Tuskegee was nothing compared to what was done to other people, or I'm so tired of hearing about Tuskegee. This is our family's story. This is our family's legacy. And we don't really want anybody to be tired of talking about Tuskegee, because it's something that we live every day. But I do recommend these wonderful books that give a wonderful historical account. I ran out of time, so I didn't give a chance to provide books about the other story here, or the other lesson here, and that's really moving from trauma to triumph, and from being a victim to a victor. There is a story there that I think is applicable on so many different levels, whether it be an individual level, or one that is more about community people wanting to become involved because they're not being treated fairly. There is a message here for anybody about what it means to be wronged, to be used, to be abused, and then to take that lesson and make something beautiful out of it, to impact and create change. There's a saying that says that the best revenge, the greatest revenge is living your best life, or the greatest revenge is doing great things. And I really do believe that what we're doing really is transforming the legacy. It really does speak, there's that mention of this moral arc turning towards justice. Well, someone has to move that moral arc, and we are, by the work that the Voices of Our Fathers organization is doing, led by my mother, we're really working to move that moral arc. And I acknowledge my mom's work, Lily's work, in her leadership and leading us thus far. And also, again, Dr. Warren, who's been just instrumental in helping us, as well as all of the other researchers and supporters who have offered encouraging words and support to us over these years. It's been a true process. It has been grassroots, and we are growing, and we are very excited about the things that we are doing. Again, this is just a message that sort of speaks to everyone. I hear, why do people continue to talk about Tuskegee? Why? you know, there are all of these other examples of what happened to African American people. Well, one of the reasons why is because of what Dr. Mays, you know, mentioned or referred to with regards to the Belmont Report and all of the things that came from Tuskegee, but also the longest non-therapeutic experiment on human beings in medical history. And that's important for us to remember. Let's see, let me go down to, I encourage everyone to take a moment to think about how they can be engaged and involved in addressing racism in healthcare and public health. I would assume that many of the people who are engaged today work in some capacity in these areas. And I encourage you to think about, if you're not doing something, what can you do? And if you are doing something, what can you do more? In my position at ACAP, or the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, I head up our research awards portfolio and am personally seeking new opportunities for support so that we can continue to build a more diverse workforce. And that's by providing exposure to medical students and to general psychiatry fellows to learn more about the field of child and adolescent psychiatry, to be more engaged and more interested in medicine and medical research, to want to go into those careers. I also strongly recommend mentorship, because there are so many people who have done some wondrous things in the world of research. Dr. Vickie Mays, I can't imagine how many people you have mentored, but I hope you would consider taking on one more, or maybe even me, because there's such a wealth of knowledge there that, you know, new generations need, and it's critically important for us to work together to continue to build momentum for what we're doing, and we can truly do that through mentorship. Here is our website address and our Twitter and our Facebook page. And we have, I am an inspirational quote person. I did put it in my intro there. But this is one of my favorite quotes about, you know, feeling inspired and being the light, which is by Amanda Gordon. We have, the onus is on us, really. You know, the syphilis study is my legacy. This is my inheritance. It's everyone who's on this call. It is your legacy. You know, it's what we have inherited from, you know, those before us. And we have a moral responsibility to be engaged and to continue to do this work. So we thank you for all of your support and your kind words. And I, you know, welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carmen Thornton. And we are about it right at our time limit. But are there any questions for Ms. Thornton or for Ms. Oh, well, we do have one from Dr. Vickie Mays. Go ahead, Dr. Mays.
One of the things that has been talked about today, and I see how it dovetails with something Dr. Warren said, is the lives of the women. I heard Dr. Warren, no, it was Dr. Hunt, I guess, that was saying tomorrow you're going to talk about maternal health. But yeah, that could be a whole avenue to think about, is whether or not we're able to dredge up the life of the women who got infected by being a partner, because it kind of goes with my theme about this notion of in our community, it's very hard to say we're just going to look at the participant or the subject, but instead that's a great example of what happened when we didn't think even further. And the tale of those women, the resources, you know, none of that actually has come about as reparations. And that's not to take away from the men, but it's to illustrate this point of it's a family, it's a neighborhood, it's a community.
Dr. Mays, sadly, to get to those names, we probably have to do it through induction. Dr. Riggins Earl and I went up when Dr. Warren first invited me to come to Tuskegee. We went up to the National Archives in Atlanta, and we pulled the 623 medical charts and went through them, not all of them, but what was interesting was on each document on the medical chart where the men gave their symptoms, on the back sheet, the question was asked, how were your wives doing? And the symptoms for the wives were often mirroring the symptoms that the men had. So it may be a way to tease it out. Delosa Alfred, I hope I pronounced the name right. Is it Delosa Alfred, one of her colleagues? I think she's at FAMU, but attorney colleagues, she presented with us before, but she has done a work in, just as you said, one of the things she pointed out was, if you take a look, most of the pictures that we see about during that time period, somewhere in the background, somewhere, there was a woman, but you often don't see her because you're focused on the men. And so the invisibility of women has to be made visible. And she has done some work there. So those might be some places to start. We have a question from one of our students, Jamelia Harris, and then we begin our close down. Ms. Harris?
I didn't mean to raise my hand. I'm sorry. It was a misclick. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. All right. So thank you. But first, I want to thank Brother Kai Nash, the young man who served as our first host. He had to go on to class for the second session, and now for Bianca Alcina. And Bianca, you just lit us up with that testimony, with your testimony, because there was so many celebrated. Because you on my screen, Miss Carmen Head Thornton is to your left, my right, and right above you is Miss Libby Head. And I'm just thinking, seeing this graphic in front of me, that you are her. You're walking the path. That this is your grandfather and your great grandfather and your family members, and now because of that, Miss Head, this is amazing to me. That if the so-called syphilis study did anything, was to create a groundswell of people and young people who went on through what you're doing now to receive education to ensure it doesn't happen to others again. And that is so massive, because they're not only doing this, but they're doing so many things around the world. So Dr. Warren, can you please give us our last words before we go to close?
I think the last words have been spoken throughout the day, and it's just illuminating to be able to think and rethink all the things that we've heard about, and I'm just excited and encouraged by the enthusiasm and the momentum that's come forth. We've got much work to do, and we've started it, and it will continue. Tuskegee's history is critically important, but Tuskegee's future is equally as important. Both go together, and we shall make it happen.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to all the presenters for today. Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble, Mrs. Libby Head for your phenomenal work, Dr. Vickie Mays, and Mrs. Carmen Head Thornton. Thank you all so much. Thank again the Barrett Honor students for their presence and their professionalism. Key Nash and Bianca Alcina, we thank you so much.